Without further ado, I think it's time. It's 7:02. As always, I try to stick to a time constraint where it's full of value. We can get in, get out, and then give you the actionable steps that you're looking for. This is a workshop that's near and dear to my heart because as of 2 weeks ago, this wasn't even planned. I released a video of me teaching my mom how to skip, and it exploded. It had 2 million views and a bunch of comments asking, how do you do this? So, my hope is I'm going to show you how I've taken clients through this progression so you can build a body that's strong, mobile, and powerful. The key piece here being building power. I think that we have been misled to think power is reserved for athletes, but power is the key to effortless movement. And I will explain why as we go through tonight's presentation. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm pretty proud of the presentation look if I don't say so myself. Let's see here. And I'm going to pin myself in the corner. Excellent. Can I have somebody come off the mic real quick to let me know that we are seeing what I'm seeing here?
I see it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Okay. So once again, thank you all for being here to the Effortless Movement Workshop. We're going to learn how to skip, bend, and twist without hesitation. Now, when I was looking at all of the forms or registrations, one of the questions that I always ask is, how long have you been following me? Because if I have a workshop full of people that know who I am, I'm not going to waste the time and introduce myself again. But we do have a lot of new faces, and I do feel like sharing a brief backstory gives you the context necessary to use the information that I'm going to give you. So, who am I? I'm Dr. Brandon Parker. I'm a chiropractor and I'm a strength coach, but I'm not like your typical chiropractor. And I think that's just because of my upbringing. As a strength and conditioning specialist, my goal was to make sure that athletes were as strong, as mobile, and as injury free as possible. And even though I was getting great results and it was a very good time, the demand of the job just wasn't aligned with my family values. The idea of waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning to train somebody and then missing dinner to train people at like 7, 8, 9 just wasn't going to be something that was congruent with my hopes of a future family life. So I decided that I wanted to go further in my education and I decided to become a chiropractor. Now, the way that I practice as a chiropractor is very different. When I was in school, I realized that the current health model is all reactive. People come to you with an issue versus how do we actually help people prevent the issue from happening altogether? I mean, in fact, in order for me to bill insurance, I have to diagnose you with a problem. There is no code for me saying, hey, we're just preventing things here. And I didn't like that. And in fact, if you look at the left-hand picture here, this is me talking to my colleagues as the valedictorian of my class saying that we need to set the standard and help people get healthy before they see the detriments of their health deteriorating. So, as somebody that believes that I need to be practicing the way that I believe people should be practicing, I wasn't going to be able to be hired by anybody else because the way that I practice isn't going to be able to be reimbursed by insurance. I decided to go out on my own and take a chance on myself. And as a new business owner, you do everything in your power to help as many people as possible to build a name for yourself. And that's where I took to social media. I tried to put out all my best insights out there. I was listening to my in-person clients and I was trying to magnify that across the social media landscape and just say, hey, if they're having these problems, I'm going to help solve this for other people. And over the course of the last 3 years, we accumulated around a million and point two followers. And when you look at my demographics, over 70% of my demographics are people over the age of 40. So you can assume who my clientele has been for the last 3 years and why I've become somewhat of a specialist when helping that target demographic. And I'll tell you what, my clients can speak to this. Every time that we're on a one-on-one chat and I hear things like, I am now able to get up and off the floor. I'm able to connect with my grandkids. I'm able to do XYZ without my body holding me back. I get goosebumps. And in fact, I'm thinking about it and I'm getting it right now. That's the stuff that fills my cup. And I am truly grateful to be here tonight. Now, on the right hand side here, you see me teaching my mom how to skip. And this all came from me having the pleasure of training her like one of my clients. But that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit where I'm coming from. So when you hear about this information, just understand that I have been blending my clinical experience and what the gold standard research currently says right now about what it would take to reach your goals. So if you don't believe me, believe the thousands of research studies that would also validate this approach. So I want to introduce you to Lynn. Lynn is one of my in-person clients. She is 68 years old, and she came to me after trying trainer, after physical therapist, after chiropractor, and a lot of people just didn't know what to do with her. I mean, to be fair, you got to get really creative with somebody that has two hip replacements, a non-repairable shoulder injury where she doesn't have a great range of motion, and she had brain surgery where her coordination was off and the whole entire left side of her body was weaker than her right because of that surgery. And I asked her, I was like, be honest with me. Like, how do you feel right now? Like, I want to truly understand where you are so I can help you get to where you want to go. And she just told me, she's like, she feels like she's losing her independence. She's having a hard time balancing. Her strength and mobility is no longer there, and she feels like her world is closing in. Now, I share this for a number of reasons. Maybe you don't have two hip replacements. Maybe you didn't have brain surgery. But I'm sure that there is some sentiment here that you can relate to where you know you can better your body. And you know if you don't start taking care of it right now, there might be an issue similar to Lynn's. And the cool thing is I'm going to show you exactly how we got results with her, because if Lynn can do it, I know you can too. So with every single person I work with, I ask them, what is the North Star goal? Give me an idea of what we are trying to do here, because having a general idea of where we're heading, you're going to get general results. So I had her get very specific. She's like, Dr. Parker, I just want to be strong. I was like, well, what does that mean? And she goes, I don't want to feel limited. I was like, well, what does that mean? She goes, you know what? I want to skip. Which is funny because I feel like everything kind of happens all together. Is like, I had Lynn here talk about skipping, then my mom's talking about skipping. I don't know what it is, but it's almost like that's the new trend here. But this is a picture of her working on some of the balance that we've been working on. But when she told me that she wanted to be able to skip, I then knew I had to explore what her ankles can do, her knees can do, what her hips can do, what's her coordination look like. So when you give me specifics, or when you are specific with your goal, you know exactly what you need to start to improve. So that's what I did with Lynn. I took her through a mobility screening and I figured out exactly what she was lacking compared to the goal that she had for herself. And this is what we found. She was lacking tendon and joint strength. When I asked her to do simple things like squatting, she felt it in her knees. It didn't feel great. Well, if you can't do a bodyweight squat, the chances of you being able to skip, which is you absorbing around 2 to 5 times your body weight in force and stress, it's probably not going to happen. So I knew that we had to start there. We had to make sure that her body and her bones were actually ready for that level of impact. 2, I asked her to get on a single leg just to see what her basic balance looked like, and she couldn't maintain an upright posture. Well, if you can't stand on one foot, I don't think we're going to be able to jump, hop, and switch feet, because that's what skipping is. So we agreed that we also had to start building the balance. And then, of course, because I knew she was lacking in the squat mechanics that we talked about earlier, the chances of her being able to express enough power in a way that would be safe was probably not there, like trying to jump or skip. So, with this crystal clear idea of what needed to be improved, we then had to break it into phases. Because if we started to build power right off the rip and start jumping, twisting, things like that, her body wasn't strong enough to protect her from future injury. So that wouldn't make a lot of sense. And that's why we had to start with phase one, which is foundational strength building and stability building. In this phase, we're focusing on making sure that the joint and tendon health is where it needs to be. We're making sure that we're dialing in our nutrition to repair the body because exercise is stressing it. And of course, something that I think goes without saying, but I think I should say here is we had to make sure that she was building consistency of showing up. A lot of people get going down the right path, but lack that consistency and end up crashing and burning. You can have the perfect program, but if you don't stick with it, it doesn't matter, right? So this was the general framework or overview that I knew that we had to travel down this path together. And I'm going to break down each one of these phases for you and give you examples on how you would build it. So let's say you are like Lynn when her and I first met. You're lacking foundational strength. You're lacking foundational stability. Your balance may need a little bit of work. What do we focus on? Well, for Lynn, we had to make sure that she had solid bone density. As a female at 68 years old, we need to make sure that her bones are ready for impact. The last thing that we want to do is risk a stress fracture because we didn't do our due diligence. So, what we had to focus on there is resistance training within her capabilities, but stressing those bones in a way that would stimulate the bone density. Two, with the the hip replacements, she had a lot of mobility loss, more so than what the hardware would limit. So I knew that we had to take some time to restore the access to hip mobility that she should have. So when she's doing foundational moves like the squat and the hinge, the hips weren't getting in the way. And then, of course, total body strengthening, because why would we focus on just the bottom half of our body when we can actually focus on everything all at once? Now, that was my thought process. But as I work with anybody, I need to make sure that I am backed by the latest research. And this is exactly what it suggests. We need to be exploring strength training anywhere between 2 to 3 times per week. With here's the kicker, especially if you're building your foundational strength, slow exercise tempos and isometrics. Now, what that means is if we are doing a body weight squat, we are going to intentionally lower ourselves very slow. We're going to pause underneath that tension, and then we're going to return to the top. What an isometric is think of like a plank where you're resisting gravity, but you're not moving at all. These two strategies do two things. Well, maybe three. One, it introduces movement slowly. So if there is something that feels wonky, we can back out of it pretty quickly. Two, it teaches your body how to do the movement faster because you're spending more time in that movement. And three, it allows for your tendons to spend more time under tension, which allows them to become healthier over time. So if you're trying to rebuild your foundation, slow tempos and isometrics are your best friend. Put that in your back pocket. That is a clinical pearl. At least that's what my mentor would say. Now, of course, when I see these two things where it says 2 to 3 strength training sessions, 2 to 3 mobility sessions, that might be overwhelming to some people. Remember that this would all be organized according to your availability, preferences, and capabilities. As some of my clients would, well, all of my clients would contest to, every single thing that we build out is with consistency in mind. We can make anything work as long as you give the preferences, and so can you. Okay. So, what does that example look like? This is a very busy screen, but let's just focus on the left-hand side here. This was or is an example of what we did with Lynn in phase one. This was one of her 3 strength training sessions. So it took her about 30 minutes to get through this routine. And what I like to use is called the category method. Tonight's not about teaching the category method because that can get us in the weeds, but just keep in mind that this method is an easy way to build out a total body strengthening approach. And what we focused on mainly is making sure that the upper body was building strength while especially rehabbing and restoring the lower body because that was her goal, skipping. So let's make sure I'm driving this point home with the isometrics and the slow tempos, and then give you the rationale as to why some of these exercises were in her program. What I would love for you to look at is the sumo squat, which is right here that I'm circling. It's the middle picture on the right hand side here. If I wanted to do the proper tempo here during my foundational phase, I would lower for 3 seconds, pause at the bottom for 2 seconds, and then I would rise up at a normal speed for 1 second. That is a great way to build that foundational strength. Now, what does an isometric look like? I would like for you to look at the bottom left-hand side here. This is me doing a heel elevated wall sit where for Lynn, I put her in this position because I wanted to expose her quad tendon, that tendon that goes over your kneecap, to stress to allow for it to get stronger and prepared for jumping like activities. Now, this is just a basic move or strength training session that we would do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we focused on building her mobility and her stability specific to her goal. Looking on the left-hand side here, you see me helping Lynn get into what we call external rotation of the hip. It's just a fancy way of saying that your hip is rotating outwards. Your hip's ability to rotate outwards is going to be directly linked to your ability to squat in a way that feels comfortable to you. If your hips can't rotate in that direction, usually your squat looks a lot like loading your lower back and causing discomfort. And that was what's happening for her. So we worked on restoring that in the picture that you see here. And then on the rightmost side of the screen, you see us doing a modified couch stretch. The front of her hips and her ankles were just not moving the way that they should. So we found a way to put both of those areas on stretch, and that allowed for her to get a more running like mobility. And then dead center in the middle, we have her doing a variation of the star balance drill that a lot of you love to see on my Instagram. For this one, she's just pushing the plates as far as she can away from her, and then she'll circle back and try to pull the plates back into her body. It's a fun, gamified way of building balance with having that broomstick in her hand just for a little bit of help if she needs it. I'm hoping I'm making sense so far, but this is what we would do for the foundational phase if you are somebody that knows that your knees are bothering you when you squat and you're nowhere near, I would say, higher levels of weightlifting. Okay. But as Lynn progressed and graduated from this phase, we went into phase 2, which is what we call movement mastery. Now, this is where all the magic happens. This is where all your hard work manifests into something very beautiful. Because I like to say, like, your foundational phase is essential to making sure that your body is ready to move. And you have your phase 3, which is like, let's get real fun here and express power, right? But right here, phase 2 is the bread and butter to a life-proof body. And it's the concept and understanding that whenever your body experiences a stress higher than what it can currently handle, it will get injured. More simply put, if I can only bicep curl 10 pounds and I try to go grab 60 pounds, I'm going to create an environment that's more than likely going to cause an injury. Well, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, duh. It makes a lot of sense. So what are we doing here? Our goal in movement mastery is to train through a full range of motion. We're not cutting out any ranges unless we have a compromised joint. And we're going to try to build as much strength as possible. So it's rare of us to ever encounter a situation where the stress is higher than what we can currently handle. If you are stronger, if you have a protective buffer of strength, mobility, balance, stability, endurance, you are going to be that person that for some reason never gets injured. Whereas you have somebody that is practically sedentary, only hangs out, like goes to work, probably hangs out on the couch and wonders why the back is hurting and always getting injured. Well, you have become weaker. And because you're weaker, you can't take on as much stress as if you were stronger. So that is something that if we had one thing to take home here tonight, build strength so your chances of getting injured plummets. And that's what our goal was with Lynn. We wanted to build protective strength. We wanted to truly start introducing balance and coordination in a way that's pretty challenging. And then, of course, continue down this path of preparing the joints and preparing the tendon for faster movement. What does the gold standard say about this? Well, somewhat of the same. Same amount of sessions for strength training, but we want to start exploring a faster tempo. So no longer that slow descent into a squat, more so just a regular descent to a squat and then returning back to the top. And once again, having balance and coordination sessions continue to stack and get more complex as you get better. So what would be an example of a phase 2 or movement mastery strength day and mobility or power prep day? Well, let's look at the left-hand side here. Once again, I apologize for it being so busy, but I try to keep it all on one screen. Well, looking at the tempo, we are still going to keep the pause in our programming. The reason why is if you lower down with regular speed, but you pause at the bottom, that ensures that you still have control. And then if you return to the top with a little bit more authority, like you're not going through it too fast, but you are making sure that you're pushing with authority, you're going to start doing something really special. But I'm going to let you know about that on phase 3 because that is the primary outcome of that. So to walk you through a couple of the strategies here, remember that Lynn was doing a wall sit for the isometric in the bottom left corner on phase 1. Well, we took that wall sit and we made it more complex and more specific to her running. We had her calf raise turn into more of a running specific calf raise. We took her general sumo squat that was full of stability because of the wide stance, and we switched it out for a single leg step down. All of this to prepare her legs for what we started with, which would be skipping. Now, keep in mind that we talked about a full range of motion. If we look at this step down that she is going through right here, her leg on the upper platform there, she is in a full range of motion. Her thigh can't go any more up. Her glute on that side is fully stretched, which means when a muscle is fully stretched and fully squeezed, it has the highest capacity to grow. So we're building muscle in an efficient way. But also, number 2, what do you think happens when you are strong through a full range of motion? Well, there's a lower chance that you're going to find yourself in a situation where stress is higher than what you can currently handle. So as you can see on the left-hand side here, we're playing around with tempos, we're speeding things up, and we're making movements a little bit more complex. Okay. Once again, more complex in context of getting closer to the skipping. Over to the right-hand side here, this is something that I think is going to be very illuminating to a lot of you. Left-hand side, you can see Lynn here holding on to a resistance band that is anchored above her. You might be asking yourself, what does that do? Well, when you pull down on a thick resistance band and you hop up in the air and you land, That resistance band is going to take weight off of your body. So I'm 200 pounds. If I'm pulling down on a band and I jump, that band is going to slow me down as I try to make contact with the ground again. So instead of my 200 pounds times 2 to 5 times my body weight, it's going to be much less than that because the band is allowing me to softly tap on the ground. So what am I doing here? Well, with Lynn, I actually had music playing in the background and she was building coordination as she was jumping and preparing her ankles, knees, and hips for skipping, but in an environment that she was currently capable of. You go over to the right-hand side here. You have Lynn doing a kettlebell swing. Kettlebell swings, when done properly, are amazing for building glute power and, well, just general lower body power. And it's no impact. Then we look over to the right-hand side here. We have weight switches. This is more complex and more difficult than what you saw with the star balance drill. This is because she's going to be on one leg and she's going to be switching that dumbbell from one arm to the other arm. And when that weight switches, her body has to dynamically react to that shifting of body weight. And for somebody that has a hip replacement, she doesn't really get as much good feedback that she normally would get if it was her actual hip. And this was a good opportunity for her to learn how to balance when not having the amount of support that she was used to. Okay. So that's what movement mastery phase or phase 2 would look like. So you might be asking, like, am I ready for phase 2? The idea would be if you can exercise in a way that doesn't cause you any type of discomfort, you can play around with single leg stances, going through a full range of motion. This would be a good idea of, like, yeah, I am in the movement mastery phase. And then also, do you feel comfortable? Like, do you look at this right-hand side of the screen and think to yourself, like, oh, I'm not ready for that? That's okay. That might be a sign that we have to focus on more of the foundational movements. Let's see here. I think one of my cats wants to get in. Oh, ran away. All right, well, they'll more than likely come back. And then the last phase that I have taken Lynn through, which is what I like to call lifetime prime. This is where we had to focus on building type 2 muscle fiber. If you're not privy to this information, after the age of 30, humans, male and female, start losing muscle at an accelerated rate. And it's harder to build muscle. And the type of muscle that we lose more often than not is what we call type 2 muscle fiber. Without getting too fancy, this is a quick way to explain what each of them do. Type 1, think of a marathon runner. That super lean, super cut can go for days. That person is full of type 1 muscle fiber. Now I want you to think of an Olympic sprinter. That Olympic sprinter can't really go for days, but exerts a tremendous amount of power quickly. That's our type 2 muscle fiber. And as we get older, our type 2 muscle fiber, because one, we don't use it. Most people stop being athletic after high school. But two, we just start to lose it because that's what happens. We start to see the decline in certain movements that we take for granted. That could be skipping. That could be jumping up a couple flights of stairs where you kind of feel springy versus holding on to the side and hoping you can get up to the top, right? That's us not being able to balance as much as we used to, because think about it, you need to react quickly in terms of changing your body weight to balance and stabilize in a unstable environment. And I feel like a majority of people are experiencing, quote unquote, their age is because they lost their power. They lost their ability to exert force. And it's one thing, and the reason why I presented this in a way that was a continuum is I can't tell most of you to go train your power. Because if you were to do that and put that level of force and stress on your body, you might get injured. That's why you have to do these foundational steps beforehand so your body is ready to train for power. And once you do have this higher level of power and these buffers of strength, that's when movement becomes effortless. It's the idea of if I say, hey, go pick up that 100-pound item, you're gonna be like, that's gonna be really hard. Maybe, but like, what if you were able to pick up 500? That's 1/5 of your strength capacity. That's probably easy for you now. So it's all relative. So it's the idea of if we want movement to be effortless, we have to be able to exert force, exert power, and have a certain level of strength to make it effortless. So I hope that's making sense. And when it comes to the gold standard research, once again, strength training 2 to 3 times per week, even faster tempos. And then on our mobility slash power prep days, that's when we'll start to explore a little bit more impacts, a little bit more power expression. So, what does that look like? On the left hand side here, you'll notice that the movements look relatively the same. Now, I will explain a little bit more of the background to this just to make sure that we're on the same page. So, if we were to look at the left hand side here, I need to make sure that her single leg balance and stability is ready for something like skipping. So, a single leg Romanian deadlift is a great way to explore if she has that hip stability we're looking for. Here's Lynn doing a sliding reverse lunge, where if you do not have the stability, your foot will keep on sliding back and you might get stuck in a split. So for her to have that level of control tells me that if we were doing something like a skipping pattern, her body is prepared for that. We have a isometric lunge, once again, still making sure that the tendons and joints are prepared for a level of stress, such as skipping. And then we have a single leg calf raise, where she is just making sure that that calf is ready to go. Now, what does the tempos look like? Well, the tempo is with the caveat of being always in control. You're moving through these movements as fast as possible. So, for example, if we were doing a row here, so you can see Lynn on the top right corner here doing a cable row, her cue here is allow that weight to return back to the stack in a controlled manner, but relatively fast. And as soon as she's ready to extend, she yanks it, once again, in a controlled manner, back to the starting position. With this level of force exertion, she'll be able to prepare her tendons, her muscles, and ligaments for higher levels of stress. And what that higher level of stress would look like when we express it is one, skipping, which is here on the left-hand side. Two, we have ball throws where she throws heaters. She throws this really hard at me. And it's really impressive to see that she's able to do that. And then three, skater hops where she's jumping side to side in a low position to make sure that her body is prepared for that. Now, when you talk to Lynn today, she tells me that even though her shoulder is still inoperable, she's getting much more range out of her shoulder. Her squats are easier. When she goes to the golfing, when she goes golfing, her swing feels great. There's no more shoulder pain. And when it comes to spending time with her family, she no longer has to say no. That's what gets me going. That's what makes me so happy. And I want to make sure that I drive home the fact here. A couple facts here. Why did this work? And why will this work for you if you want to do this on your own? Well, we made a goal and we got crystal clear on what that goal was. It was skipping for her. It can be just squatting for you. It can be hiking at the once it's summer again. It could be even losing body fat if that's what you want. But make the goal crystal clear. Two, you have to be very honest with yourself on where you currently are. It might be uncomfortable. It might be like, man, I let myself slip to a point where I shouldn't have. And that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, but you have to be able to sit with it. Because when you're honest and you set yourself a true baseline, that actually gives you the opportunity to celebrate every single win that comes along. Versus I've seen it all the time where people are afraid to look at their starting point and then they make great progress, but they don't recognize it because they never recognize where they actually started. So we, I would say assess your capabilities and then just build a roadmap. Now, of course, that takes a little bit of expertise, but you can get started and you can do a lot of guesswork and get pretty far. In the idea of like, I want to be able to run a 5K. Well, if 5K is your goal and you are not running at all, well, probably the next step is going to be walking. Maybe that's going to be 5,000 steps. Maybe that's 6,000 steps. Maybe that turns into a little bit of a walk jog. Maybe that turns into a pure jog. Maybe that turns into a run. You need to be able to look at that roadmap and say, okay, that makes sense. That looks like jumps that I can handle. And that looks like something that's going to give me clarity. Because when you have a clarity and you know that you're working towards a goal, nothing's really going to stop you because when you see the results, it's addictive is a strong word, but it's self-reassuring. We're like, I'm going to keep doing this because I'm seeing the benefits. And then, of course, why it worked for Lynn, and I would implore for you to do it, is listen to your body. Modify things when it's not perfect. Life is always changing. So that's why your program and your approach should be a living, breathing thing. If you create something that's so rigid and it only will matter if your life is perfect, you're going to fail before you even start. But if you create this framework and roadmap of like, yeah, I just gotta keep working towards these things, it's always going to have you end up in the right direction. So one last thing that I wanted to mention is this framework doesn't work, or it doesn't just work for skipping. It works for anything. Now I have Catherine. She's here tonight, and I asked her like, "Can I celebrate you? Can I brag about you? Because the story itself is just amazing, and I can't believe, well, I can believe, but I cannot wait to see it unfold even further." So she came across my platform back when I did a free challenge, maybe like 2 years ago, something like that, and she had a frozen shoulder. And now she decided that she would like to work with us. And in the matter of months, she went from an incline push-up with blocks, so a very small range of motion, to now being able to do knee push-ups for multiple reps. And it's going to be a full push-up before she knows it. That's awesome to hear. Once again, that's what gets the hair going. Dead center in the middle of this slide here, we have Jana. She came to me because she was avoiding stairs. She went to a physical therapist. She got meniscus surgery and nothing was helping her knee pain. And she told me that she was at a point where she was saying no to her family, like when it came to family trips, because she just didn't want to be the ball and chain. And this is a picture of her sending a picture that she sent to me and a text message she sent to me. They're at Mount Rainier and they did one of the more moderate hikes, and she didn't feel like she was held back at all. And then last but not least, you have Jennifer on the right hand side here. She had chronic lower back pain, and all we did was make sure that we found her goal. We strengthened her entire body, but more specific to her lower back. And she said it's the first time in 20 years that she was on a hike and she didn't think about the aches and pains that she's had. Now, you don't have to have an injury, but the reason why I show these is because if you're just starting from a point where you're deconditioned because it's been a while since you've exercised, you're actually in a better starting point than the case studies that I've shared here.